You ever notice how Star Wars loves to give us heroes with actual problems? Luke whining about power converters, Anakin losing his mind over sand, even Han Solo tripping into heroism because he owed people money. And then there's Rey. She walks onto the stage with all the confidence of someone who already finished the video game and just showed up to watch the cutscenes. It's fascinating at first, but then you realise the movie's asking you to clap for a character who never actually had to earn anything. The weird part is, they set her up like she was going to be this grand mystery. The trailers made it look like the Force itself had chosen her. The lightsaber literally screamed her name from inside a box, and the whole fandom went into theory overdrive. Is she a Skywalker, a Kenobi, a clone, a Palpatine? And the answer turned out to be kind of all, and none of the above. Which is like being promised a gourmet meal and getting a stale piece of bread with mystery toppings. And look, I'm not saying every character needs to be broken and miserable to work, but you need at least one believable flaw, one human crack in the armour, something to make the audience lean in. Instead, Rey is like if someone took all the highlight reels of every past Star Wars hero and crammed them into one character without giving her the actual grind. She flies the Falcon better than Han, uses the Force faster than Luke, and swings a lightsaber harder than Anakin on his angriest day. That's not inspiring. That's just exhausting. The sequels didn't do her any favours either. One movie tells us she's nobody, another says she's the granddaughter of the galaxy's creepiest grandpa, and the last lets her slap a Skywalker sticker on her forehead like a name tag at a party. And the more the films pulled this tug-of-war with her identity, the less fans cared. Because it stopped being about character and turned into a guessing game that nobody wanted to play anymore. It's like a bad magic trick where the magician keeps forgetting the card you picked. But here's the thing that stings the most. Rey could have been amazing. Her first scenes on Jakku are haunting, her bond with Finn had sparks, and Daisy Ridley had the talent to pull off a complex, layered hero. Instead, the scripts gave her cheat codes instead of challenges, shortcuts instead of scars. And when you stack her next to Luke's desperation, or Anakin's downfall, she ends up looking less like a legend and more like the kid who copied homework and still got a gold star. In this video, we're going to break down why Rey might just be the most annoying character in Star Wars. We'll look at how her story turned from promising to pointless, why her powers felt more like writer tricks than earned victories, and how the sequels used her as a band-aid instead of a protagonist. By the end, you'll see why fans walked away frustrated, and maybe even why Rey's greatest legacy is teaching future Star Wars stories what not to do. There was a time when audiences were genuinely curious about who Rey really was. Her introduction in The Force Awakens had that classic Star Wars mystery vibe. A scavenger on a desert planet with a hidden past, a connection to something larger, and a hint of destiny in her every move. The setup had fans speculating wildly about whether she was a Skywalker, a Kenobi, or even some secret offspring of Palpatine, long before that reveal was actually made. Curiosity kept people hooked on her story because it felt like the answer would matter. The way she instantly connected to the Millennium Falcon was interesting. Her ability to fly it with ease despite having no formal training opened the door to questions. Was it the Force guiding her hands, or was she unknowingly tied to the ship's history? Fans leaned in closer, thinking these moments would lead to an epic reveal that explained everything. Instead, it only deepened the intrigue, leaving breadcrumbs that begged to be picked up in later films. Then came her use of the Force, in ways that seemed impossible for a character with no teacher. Convincing a stormtrooper to release her with a Jedi mind trick, lifting boulders like she had been training for years, and dueling Kylo Ren to a standstill in her first encounter. These scenes were mysterious and people wanted answers. Was she secretly trained as a child? Was there a hidden master in her past? Or was she something entirely new? The marketing doubled down on this mystery. Trailers teased her connection to Luke's lightsaber, which called to her in Maz Kanata's castle like it was alive. The Force visions she experienced added layers of intrigue, showing glimpses of the Knights of Ren, Luke, and even her own younger self on Jakku. All of it built tension, promising audiences that her backstory was going to be a game changer. People were hooked, ready for the reveal of a lifetime. But in the end, that curiosity turned to confusion when the films failed to follow through. What started as genuine excitement turned into a guessing game with no satisfying conclusion. Fans went from eagerly asking, "Who is Rey?" to reluctantly asking, "Does it even matter anymore?" And once that shift happened, the charm of her mystery began to collapse under its own weight. If there's one word that defines Rey's character arc, it's frustrating. Not because she was irredeemably bad, but because she was built on wasted potential. At first, she seemed like a blank slate ready to be filled with rich storytelling, but the sequels refused to give her that. Instead, she was gifted ability after ability, without the struggle or learning that makes a hero worth rooting for. Take her lightsaber battles, for example. In The Force Awakens, she defeats Kylo Ren despite never holding a lightsaber before. In The Last Jedi, she goes toe-to-toe with Snoke's guards after only a few days of training. By The Rise of Skywalker, she's flipping over TIE fighters and hurling lightning like she's been reading the Force instruction manual since birth. All of this with almost no actual teaching or consequences. It feels unearned, and that's what makes it annoying. And then there's her personality. Rey often feels less like a person and more like a checklist of traits designed to move the plot forward. She's brave when bravery is needed, vulnerable when vulnerability is convenient, and compassionate whenever the script requires it. None of it feels organic, which leaves her coming across as shallow. Compare that to Luke, who whined about power converters, or Anakin, whose arrogance got him into constant trouble. Flaws made them real. Rey had none. The films also played tug-of-war with her identity. First, she's nobody from nowhere. Then she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. Along the way, she borrows the Skywalker name without actually earning it. Every step feels like a writer's room scrambling to make her special without doing the work. Instead of being satisfied, audiences were left groaning as her story turned into a never-ending cycle of surprise reveals that meant nothing. What's sad about Rey isn't just how she was written, but how she represents the disappointment of an entire trilogy. Fans wanted someone to carry the torch after Luke, Leia, and Han. Instead, they got a character who seemed built in a boardroom rather than a story. Every time her journey fell flat, it reminded audiences of what could have been. That sense of loss is what makes talking about Rey genuinely painful. Her relationship with Finn is the clearest example. In The Force Awakens, their chemistry was undeniable. Finn clearly cared about her, and their bond felt like it could anchor the trilogy. But by the time The Last Jedi rolled around, their connection was sidelined. By The Rise of Skywalker, Finn's story was reduced to him yelling her name across the battlefield. Whatever emotional payoff was possible between them was wasted, leaving only empty echoes of what fans once hoped for. The same goes for Rey and Luke. The idea of the Last Jedi Master training a new hero should have been epic. Instead, their time together was awkward, rushed, and often contradictory. Luke wanted the Jedi to end, Rey wanted them to live on, and instead of resolving that tension in a meaningful way, the films gave us half-hearted lessons and an anticlimactic farewell. The teacher-student bond never grew into something memorable. Even her final confrontation with Palpatine feels hollow. This should have been the emotional climax of the saga, the moment where Rey's lineage and choices came full circle. Instead, it was another case of her simply overpowering the villain with abilities she never earned. The galaxy cheered for her victory, but audiences were left wondering what the victory even meant. It felt more like a reset button than a resolution. And that's the sorrow of Rey's story. Not that she was awful, but that she was empty. Every thread that could have made her compelling was dropped, ignored, or written around. In the end, she didn't just fail herself, she failed the promise of what Star Wars could have been for a new generation. But let's be honest, there were moments when Rey was undeniably impressive. Seeing her pull Luke's lightsaber to her hand in the snow was a pure goosebumps moment. Watching her stand her ground against Kylo Ren in the forest fight had real cinematic weight. For a brief second, it felt like we were witnessing the birth of a new legend, the kind of moment fans would be talking about for decades. The awe was real, even if it didn't last. Her introduction on Jakku was beautifully done. The silent shots of her scavenging, sliding down sand dunes, and eating alone in the wreckage of fallen Star Destroyers captured the loneliness of her life better than any dialogue could. It was visual storytelling at its best, and it made her feel grounded in a world we instantly believed. That sense of scale and immersion was classic Star Wars at its peak. And for all the criticism, Daisy Ridley gave Rey a presence that made you want to keep watching. Her earnest delivery, wide-eyed wonder, and quiet moments of vulnerability gave glimpses of the hero Rey could have been. When she talked about waiting for her family, there was a real ache in her voice. For a brief moment, you could believe she was a girl, desperate for belonging, in a galaxy that had forgotten her. The lightsaber fights, as flashy as they were, also carried undeniable spectacle. Rey dueling Kylo on Starkiller Base, crossing blades in the throne room, and finally facing him on the wreckage of the Death Star are all visually iconic. The cinematography and choreography may not always have made sense, but the imagery was unforgettable. It gave her the appearance of greatness, even if the substance wasn't there. That's the thing about Rey. She looked like the hero Star Wars needed. She felt like she was destined for greatness. The awe she inspired in those early moments was genuine, even if it was built on shaky foundations. It's what makes her story such a roller coaster, because the highs looked so good, but the lows were impossible to ignore. For all her flaws, Rey still leaves room for hope. Not because her character arc delivered, but because it showed the possibilities of what could be done if Lucasfilm actually learns from its mistakes. Rey proves that audiences want mystery, they want spectacle, but most of all they want characters who feel real. If future Star Wars heroes can embrace that lesson, there's still a chance to create something meaningful. Imagine a version of Rey who actually struggled, who lost battles, who trained for years, who made mistakes and had to grow past them. Imagine if she had a mentor she truly clashed with, a friend she almost lost, and a destiny that felt both terrifying and earned. That's the kind of story that still resonates, and it's not too late for Star Wars to try again. We've seen signs that Lucasfilm knows this. Characters like Din Djarin in The Mandalorian or Cassian Andor in Andor are grounded, flawed, and human. They succeed because they're not invincible, but because they fight through vulnerability. That's the hope Rey's failure leaves behind, a reminder that perfect characters aren't compelling, but broken ones are unforgettable. There's also hope in the fans themselves. Star Wars has always been driven by the passion of its audience, and the fact that people still debate Rey years later proves that she left an impact. Even if it's not the one Lucasfilm intended, it means people care enough to keep the conversation alive. And in that conversation, the future of Star Wars can still find direction. Rey may never become the icon the sequels wanted her to be, but she doesn't have to define what comes next. If anything, she can be the cautionary tale that inspires better storytelling. And in a galaxy this big, hope is always just one new story away. At the end of the day, Rey's story is a tragedy, not because she failed, but because the people writing her did. She represents what happens when a franchise forgets what made its heroes compelling in the first place. Without flaws, without growth, without sacrifice, a character becomes hollow. And that hollowness is why she ended up the most annoying figure in Star Wars, not because she was hated, but because she was empty. Think about Luke's journey, filled with doubt, arrogance, and mistakes that almost destroyed him. Think about Anakin, consumed by his own fears and anger until it led him to tragedy. Those stories still matter because they feel human. Rey's, in contrast, was a checklist of moments that looked iconic but carried no real weight. It's like eating candy when you wanted a full meal. The saddest part is that Rey could have been great. The foundation was there, the actress was talented, the setup was strong. But when the story refused to give her depth, she became more symbol than character, a placeholder in a saga that deserved better. And once fans realised that, frustration turned into apathy, which is the true death of any character. Yet even in that tragedy, there's resolution. Rey's arc teaches future writers what not to do. Don't hand-wave struggles. Don't make heroes perfect. Don't treat character like an afterthought. It's a reminder that audiences are smarter than studios sometimes give them credit for, and that real connection comes from seeing ourselves in the flaws, not the perfection. So, Rey stands as both the most annoying and the most tragic figure in Star Wars. Annoying because she was shallow, tragic because she could have been great. And in that contradiction, she leaves us with the final lesson. Heroes aren't built in writers' rooms, they're forged through struggle, sacrifice, and humanity. Something Star Wars must remember if it ever wants to find its soul again.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.